There are stories that history buried, stories that were never meant to be found. But we found them. Welcome back to Dark Chronicles. In 1930, over 1,000 economists signed a letter to the President of the United States. They begged him, "Do not sign this bill." They warned him it would trigger retaliation from every trading partner America had. They told him it would make the Depression worse. 1,028 economists from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, every major university in the country. The president signed it anyway. And here's what I want you to guess. When that bill was signed, unemployment in America was 8%. What do you think it was 2 years later? Take a guess. Drop it in the comments. Because the real number is going to shock you. Before we get into what happened in 1930, you need to understand what a tariff actually is, because it's simpler than most people think, and more dangerous than most people realize. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. When a product comes into a country from overseas, the government adds a charge, a percentage on top of the price. The idea is to make foreign goods more expensive, so people buy domestic products instead. Politicians call it protection. They say it saves jobs, but according to nearly every economist who has studied trade over the past century, tariffs don't protect, they punish. Because when you raise prices on imports, the companies that rely on those imports raise their prices too. And the countries you're taxing, they tax you back. That's exactly what happened in 1930. According to 30 30's trainer. The story begins during the 1928 presidential election. Herbert Hoover was running for president, and he made a promise to American farmers. After World War I, American farmers had expanded massively, growing crops to feed a war-torn Europe. But by the late 1920s, Europe's farms had recovered. Prices collapsed. American farmers were drowning in debt. Hoover promised to raise tariffs on agricultural imports to protect farmers from cheap foreign competition. It was a campaign promise. Simple enough. But here's where it went wrong. Once Congress started writing the tariff bill, every industry in America wanted in. Textiles, steel, chemicals, shoes, glass. What started as a farm bill became a tax on everything. The bill was written by two men, Senator Reed Smoot of Utah and Representative Smoot-Hawley of Oregon. Between them, they raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. The average tariff rate jumped to roughly 40 to 60%. The economists saw it coming. In May 1930, a petition organized by economists from across the country landed on Hoover's desk. 1,028 signatures. Paul Douglas, Irving Fisher, Frank Taussig, the most respected economic minds in America, all saying the same thing. Don't do this. It will backfire. Hoover signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act into law on June 17, 1930. He yielded to pressure from his own party and from business leaders who wanted protection from foreign competition. The economists were right. The retaliation was immediate. Canada, America's closest trading partner and largest export market, struck first. Within weeks, Canada imposed new tariffs on 16 categories of American goods, accounting for roughly 30% of U.S. exports to Canada. Then the dominoes fell. Cuba, Mexico, France, Italy, Spain, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland. Within 2 years, more than 24 countries had enacted retaliatory tariffs against the United States. And the numbers were catastrophic. U.S. exports fell from $7 billion in 1929 to $2.5 billion by 1932. Farm exports, the very thing the tariff was supposed to protect, dropped by a third. International trade didn't just decline, it collapsed by 65%. 2/3 of all global trade gone. And unemployment? Remember I asked you to guess. When Hoover signed the bill, unemployment was 8%. By 1931, it was 16%. By 1932, 25%. 1 in 4 Americans out of work. Now, economists debate how much of that was caused by Smoot-Hawley versus the broader financial collapse that was already underway. The Great Depression had started in October 1929, months before the tariff was signed. But according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, roughly 20 to 25% of the decline in trade was directly attributable to Smoot-Hawley. It didn't cause the depression, but it made it worse, significantly worse. And it spread the pain to every country that traded with the United States. The political consequences were equally brutal. Willis Hawley, the congressman who co-wrote the bill, lost his renomination. Reed Smoot, the senator, was one of 12 Republican senators who lost their seats in 1932, the largest Senate swing in American history at that time. And Herbert Hoover, he lost the presidency to Franklin Roosevelt in one of the most lopsided elections in American history. Everyone who touched that tariff paid for it. Now here's where this story stops being history and starts being today. In early 2025, the United States began raising tariffs at a pace not seen since 1930. By April 2025, the average effective U.S. tariff rate had risen from 2.5% to an estimated 27%, the highest level in over a century. The tariffs were imposed under an emergency powers law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as IEEPA. They targeted imports from China, Canada, Mexico, and eventually most of the world. Businesses were hit with new costs overnight. According to economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, nearly 90% of the tariff burden fell on American businesses and consumers, not on foreign exporters, on Americans. U.S. households paid an estimated $1,000 more in 2025 for the same goods they bought the year before. And in 2026, that number rose to $1,300. Lower-income families were hit the hardest. Groceries, clothes, cars, everything cost more. Then, on February 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court stepped in a 6-3 decision, Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump. The court ruled that IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. The tariffs were unconstitutional. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion. He was joined by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, Gorsuch, Barrett, and Jackson. The government estimated it had collected $166 billion from more than 330,000 businesses in tariffs that the Supreme Court found unconstitutional. $166 billion collected, ruled illegal. Whether those businesses will ever get their money back remains unclear. Before I tell you why this pattern keeps repeating, if you want to understand how economic policy can reshape an entire nation, I'd recommend the book The Forgotten Man by Amity Shlaes. It's the definitive history of the Great Depression and the decisions that made it worse. You can listen to it for free with a trial of Audible. First 2 books are on them. Link in the description. Here's what most people miss about this story. It's not about left or right. It's not about one president or one party. It's about a pattern that has repeated for nearly 100 years. In 1930, politicians promised that tariffs would protect American jobs. They destroyed them. In 2025, politicians promised tariffs would bring manufacturing back. According to Federal Reserve data, 90% of the cost was passed to American consumers. In 1930, over 1,000 economists warned the president. He ignored them. In 2025, hundreds of economists issued similar warnings. They were ignored too. In 1930, trade partners retaliated immediately. In 2025, Canada, Mexico, China, and the European Union all retaliated with tariffs of their own. In 1930, the politicians who wrote the tariff lost their seats. We'll see what happens this time. The lesson of Smoot-Hawley isn't complicated. Tariffs sound like protection, but protection has a price. And that price is always paid by the people they were supposed to protect. 1,028 economists warned Hoover in 1930. He didn't listen. The world paid for it for a decade. And here's my question for you. Should any president from any party have the power to raise tariffs without Congress? The Supreme Court just said no. Do you agree? Tell me in the comments. Some mistakes don't end. They repeat. If you think more people need to hear this story, hit subscribe. We uncover the darkest chapters of history that the textbooks left out every single week. And right now, this story is still being written.